So, I have a question that's just been percolating for me as I've been thinking about this passage this week. Why do we choose predatory leaders? People who feast upon us. Why do we do this? It's not a new phenomenon to have leaders who take advantage of or exploits those that they claim to be responsible for, right? And much of our history, we've had those people in charge. And for much of that history, there wasn't a whole lot you could do about it. But when there can be something done about it, when we can choose those that we follow or have as responsible for our society or our little group within it, why do we so often pick so poorly? Pick those who do harm? And I don't have a great answer for this. Is it because we're drawn to confident, charismatic people? Maybe we'll catch some of that confidence, Maybe we mistake arrogance for competence. Maybe we just believe in bullies. Perhaps we wish we could be like them on some level. Do you see how that person just takes what they want? I kind of wish I could just take what I want. Wouldn't that be great? Perhaps it's some sort of power fantasy that some of us are entertaining. Maybe those who are so predatory on their groups have such an abundance that they've collected from that we hope will also get some of the droppings from their tables. If we can be affiliated with them, surely some of that will trickle down to us. I don't know. I don't have a good answer. It's probably a multiple abundance of answers. And this goes beyond politics. I know that's where our minds go right now. But this question, as the more I think about it, the more I think about the leaders that I've followed in my own life who took advantage of people, religious leaders, business leaders, or other thought leaders in some way. And each one of them had a gathering around them, a collection of individuals who sung their praises or supported them. Even I supported them at times, So that's one of the questions I've been chewing on this week as I've been going through this text. So let me share the text with you. It starts off, we have these Pharisees who come over to Jesus, and they try to warn him about this danger that they think is imminent for him. You got to get out of this area. Herod Antipas is going to kill you. And this is interesting because it doesn't quite match up with a lot of our modern Christian, Western perspectives of what a Pharisee is supposed to be like. We read Pharisee and we automatically often go, oh, the bad guys. But these are not a monolithic group, and they certainly weren't seen as the bad guys in their society. They were religious leaders. In fact, they were the popular, common religious leaders. These were the ones who taught in the synagogues. There was an official temple apparatus for a lot of the religion that had a relationship with the state, more of a relationship with the state. And plenty of folks supported that. But this was the religion for the common person, And they had some things in common with Jesus. Jesus himself was a rabbi, and they agreed on a lot more than we think today. But it's often the minutia of difference that we focus on, because the minutia of difference is what differentiates one group from another group often. And Jesus' biggest point of criticism with the Pharisees, it wasn't the bulk of their teachings, it was that often they were hypocritical. Just like so many of us are, right? And because they didn't have enough concern for the marginalized people around them. This was a common point of criticism that Jesus had for them, especially in the book of Luke. So these Pharisees, they show us that at least some of them, some of the people in this book, the book of Luke, care about Jesus' life. I find that wonderfully complicating. I love that, actually. It helps me humanize this group instead of just thinking, well, they're the bad guys. It's not that simple. Jesus tells them audaciously, you go tell that fox. I'll get into what that means in a moment. You go tell that fox that I'm busy. I'm going to keep doing the work I'm doing. I'm going to keep healing people. I'm going to keep driving out demons. I'm going to do that work, and on the third day, my work's going to be done. I'm going to be in Jerusalem. I wouldn't want to be one of those Pharisees who feels like they need to go tell Herod that. I'm pretty sure that's not a message that they followed through on delivering, But in our text, we get this moment where Jesus is presenting himself in the role of prophet to the predatory king. In the tradition that we are most familiar with, like throughout much of the Hebrew Bible. Fox doesn't mean like that really attractive man, You go tell that foxy Herod's. No, it's not what he's saying. A fox in Jewish culture at this time was seen not just as a predatory animal, and not just as like an unclean animal, but a beast who feasts opportunistically. So there wasn't as much of like a connotation of craftiness, although that's certainly on the Greek side, and I'm sure some of Luke's listeners may have had that connotation in there. But this really seems to have at the heart of it a fox pretending to be a lion rather than a lion seeking to feast on the group, because they still had this idea of like lions as regal creatures. So you go tell that fox, that disgusting, opportunistic predator, I'm busy, but I am going to be in Jerusalem later. And Jesus changes here. He pivots in this conversation from prophet confronting power to mother. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I know that you stone your prophets. I know that fate awaits me. I'm also going to be killed there. Jerusalem is the capital of power in Judea, right? It's the cultural center for the Jewish people in this time period in Judea. It's the religious capital and the political capital. I know I'm going to be killed there because that's what Jerusalem does with its prophets. That's what our leaders do with prophets. How I have sought to gather you to me, like a mother hen gathers her baby chicks. You can hear the lament in his voice as you read these words. He is putting himself in the role of mournful mother. I find this not only endearing, but challenging. Now, there is a quick thing I want to point to. Luke is writing this after Jerusalem's been destroyed. And Jerusalem gets destroyed a few decades after Jesus' death. And I do think Luke is connecting the two events. I think he sees Jerusalem as picking, instead of the path of peace that Jesus is on, in Luke's perspective, picking affinity and alliance with the Herodians and the Romans and the religious leaders that Luke's opposed to. And he sees that as a path to destruction. And I see that as problematic in some ways. This comes just a bit too close to victim blaming for me. But I do see something extremely helpful in this text for us. And it's something that Christians have been terrible at throughout our history. Now, we've had moments of beauty in it, but there's a lot of horror in it too. Because we're being presented with this contrast of not just two different kings, not a contrast of a king and a prophet alone anyway, but two different beasts, two different animals. The fox and the mother hen. Jesus in this passage has said in the verses preceding this, I seek to invite you onto the narrow path of peace that I am on. I want you on that path with me. But it is a skinny one. It is tough. I think this is directly connected to what he's saying here as well. But you, chicks, you don't want it. You've ran off. You've chosen other things. I think there's this idea in this text of these chicks choosing foxes. And this is something we keep doing. When we get the chance to choose leaders for ourselves, far too often we pick the fox and hope that he's going to eat everybody else but us, right? And it doesn't work out like that. One of the most frustrating aspects of this to me is that we call them like a representative of God often. Us Christians often do when we're picking the leaders, right? We'll say that God has ordained them or that God has given them this power, and I find that so fiercely problematic. When we have Jesus presenting himself as a compassionate mother who's seeking to protect her chicks. How can we keep making this mistake? Now, I mentioned this isn't just about political leaders. I mean, I should clarify, this isn't just about political leaders who are of a party different than me. This is also something we need to be cautious about with leaders who represent our own values. Not everybody who professes to care about our neighbors cares about our neighbors. So we need to be attentive to these things. This also pertains to religious leaders, not just those I disagree with, but those I agree with as well. That includes me. I have seen far too many times when people are passionate about advocating for change, and then they're taken advantage of by those that they're hoping are going to lead them into change. This is why this isn't just about one person, one pastor, one leader who will go and advocate for change, make systems adjust to the needs of the people. I think this is about us as people gathering together as well. Because I've seen far too many hens, or would-be hens, really be foxes. I think this is the trouble we get into when we outsource all of our hope for change or consolidate it into a singular person. It's got to be about all of us. And not just change. The day-to-day positive things that we're busy about too. Wellness Wednesday, the shower trucks, the We Shine Village, whatever sphere that we operate in, making lunches for folks when we can. We need to be attentive to, like, those that we're working with, but we also need to be attentive to ourselves. How are we acting? Because I think it's too easy for us to emulate the leaders around us in very negative ways. We see so-and-so taking advantage of people, and we think, well, that's the way the world is, and so we take advantage of people. Or, perhaps, more insidious, kind of this stealthy resentment that could come in. We're like, I give and I give and I give. I give so much. Surely it's okay for me to take a little bit off the top. Surely it's okay for me to slip on this one thing. It only hurts that person a little bit. So I worked in finance for a little bit. I worked at Capital One. It wasn't a very attractive, super exciting job. It was in a contact center. The amount of times that we had to report elder abuse. And those situations didn't start off with this older person being put into the care of some nefarious individual. It was always somebody who cared about them, but also had just a little bit of desperation, or just a bit enough resentment, or this sense of entitlement. Well, it's okay. It's okay for me to take this. It's not really hurting so-and-so, or it's just hurting them a little bit, or worse yet, what are they going to do about it? And I'm not going to be found out. So let us be attentive to the foxes around us. Let us be attentive to who we seek to work with and follow in our own lives. But let us also be attentive to who we are and what we're doing. Because it's far too easy for us to fixate on the obvious wrongdoers and lose track of our own slides into temptation. Luckily, we don't have to do this alone. If you've made mistakes in this area, I hope you know that God is welcoming you with open wings. People can change. We see it all the time. We can change. Feel free to talk to me if you need to.